Our next speaker, and she's going to present Aligning Workforce and Community Needs. And this is Karen Norton Reeves. Karen is the CEO of Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership. She was appointed by Mayor Emanuel and the Cook County Board President. In about July of 2012, I'm told, she's been actively engaged with convening of leaders from government, academia, nonprofits, and from the private sector. And she's been identifying collaborative initiatives to improve workforce development resources for job seekers and for employers. She brings more than 10 years of experience in education, community, economic development, and workforce development to her role. Karen holds a JD degree, a non-practicing lawyer, another one, from Southern Methodist University School of Law in Dallas, Texas, a bachelor's in Spanish language and literature from Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. You can find her full bio in your program packet. So please help me welcome Karen. We so much appreciate you taking your time to be here.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Wake up. Hard to fall asleep in here. It's cold. So hope people went and got snacks. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about workforce. I sort of feel jealous of this previous topic. I'm also a former teacher, so all of these education issues tie directly into what's happening with respect to workforce development and community development. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership and what we do, and then go into some details. First of all, I need to thank Dr. Ender for allowing me to present to you today. So as you may know, he is actually the co-chair of the Chicago Cook Workforce Investment Board. And it's taken me now almost 3 years to get to the point where I actually call him Ken. We talk all the time, and he says, when are you going to stop calling me Dr. Ender? So Ken, thank you. All right. So about the partnership, the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership is the successor agency to four prior organizations. Earlier, Dr. Applegate said that the workforce development system in this country is higher education. So he's partly right, actually. There's a publicly funded workforce development system in this country, and it's funded through the Department of Labor. And all across the country, there are workforce boards and workforce investment areas. And so Chicago Cook is the second largest workforce investment area in the nation, and the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership oversees all of the federal funding that comes in for employment training into this region. So we are the second largest in the country. We are the largest that's operated by a nonprofit, and we also serve as staff to the Workforce Investment Board. The board is responsible for overseeing or helping us to oversee all those dollars that come into the region. Our budget this year is about $60 million. So many of the students that you have in your classrooms are actually funded through the dollars that come through the Department of Labor. We serve about 140,000 people annually. We have 10 standalone comprehensive workforce development centers. We have 8 satellite centers. And we also have 4 sector centers focusing specifically on manufacturing, information technology, and hospitality and retail. All right, our vision is that every person in this region will have the opportunity to build a career, and that every business in this region will have the talent that they need to grow and compete in a global economy. So I'm going to give you a lot of data and a lot of facts, and then we'll have some conversation from that. So how many people are laid off every month in this country, do you think? Somebody, just guess, holler it out. How many? 800,000. How many? 25,000, Maria says. 400,000. You want to know? 1 million plus people are laid off every month. So this is plant closures, this is reductions in force, this is any variety of issues. And pretty much I try and identify the source of this data on each one of these slides. To the extent that I don't, I'll go back and look at my notes for you. How many Americans are employed in temporary jobs? a million. Maria said 20, what'd you say? 20 million? See, y'all are going big now because you guys spoke the last time. 3 million, but that's an increase of 28% since 2010. So why is this relevant to you? It's relevant because just as you talked about with the panel earlier, you're not just serving young adults any longer. You're not just serving kids who've just come out of high school and don't want to go to a four-year college or want to test the waters in education before they go on to an advanced degree. You're serving those folks that have been impacted by the changes in our economy. So we have a lot of labels and terms for all of these people within workforce, and we have the same labels and terms within our schools. So we call them the long-term unemployed, adults, dislocated workers, opportunity youth, veterans, ex-offenders. Well, that didn't work out right, did it? And the disabled. So why do we use all these terms? Talk up. Grant funds. Oh, grant funds. Well, that was a good one. Why else do we use all these terms?
To categorize them.
And why do we want to categorize them, though?
So you can count them.
So we can count them.
So we can explain why they don't measure up to the standards that everybody else does.
Oh, that was interesting. So we can explain why they don't measure up to the standards that everyone else does. Interesting. Other thoughts?
So we can understand our school's population.
So we can understand our school's population. Yes? They have different needs. To assess needs for services. So it's actually, I think, a combination of all of those answers. There are some very positive rationales for categorizing folks. There are also some discriminatory purposes behind it as well. But let's talk about this because you're seeing all of these folks. So long-term unemployed, how are those defined? So Maria said out of the labor market for 6 months. So that's technically right. The definition is they have expended their UI benefits, unemployment insurance. So they've expended those benefits. Typically, they're about 26 weeks and beyond. Adults, dislocated workers, those are the categories under the Workforce Investment Act funding, WIA, which is now going to become WIOA in July. Hi, Rose. It's going to become WIOA in July. Opportunity youth, what does that pertain to? Maria, stop giving all the answers. All right, so that answer was students who have not graduated from high school but are still of an age where we can get them a diploma. The actual answer is those between the ages of 18 and 24. They don't necessarily have to be dropouts. They could have graduated. What they are is neither connected to employment nor education. And then veterans, dislocated workers, what are those? Remember that 1 million plus that gets laid off every month? That would be them. And also within that category are dislocated, displaced homemakers. So you've been at home, male or female. Your spouse has been working, you've been taking care of the kids and raising the family, and all of a sudden you realize you need 2 incomes in order to function. And so now you have to get back into the workplace. So in this country, 46 million families have someone who's working and earning wages, but they are still below the poverty line. So these are the working poor. And the reason this is so significant is because it affects different families in different ways. So certain segments of our population are more likely than others to be categorized as working poor. So when Dr. Ender talked about the decrease in full-time students, there's a reason for that. So what we hear is that young ladies are typically pulled out of the education system because they've got to help support somebody, support a family member, take care of someone. And young men are often pushed out, either through expulsions or just negative experiences and interactions with respect to the education system. So that's one aspect of how things happen differently and why you'll see more and more part-time students, because people actually have to continue to help support households and support families. But women make up a greater share of the working poor than men. Couple of reasons for that. On average, we earn less than men. And typically, with respect to hourly employment, get fewer hours. Now, sometimes that's because of family obligations, and sometimes it's for other reasons, some more nefarious than others. Although women comprise 47% of workers between the ages of 18 and 56, 56% of the working poor are women. Non-citizens or immigrants often have a disproportionate number, are disproportionately represented, that is, within the working poor. So 15% of these workers live below poverty, and about 30% live below the 150% of poverty level. These are phenomenal, staggering numbers, and it's important for you to know because this is representative of the demographic that you are seeing, the shift in demographics that you're seeing with respect to Harper's catchment area. With respect to African Americans and Hispanics, 12% of all African Americans who work fall below the poverty level. And 23% fall below that 150% mark. With respect to Hispanics, the rates are even higher. 14% live below the poverty level, and 29% fall below that 150% level. So when we talk about this debate going on across the country around raising the minimum wage, I usually get my blood boiling listening to the debate. So should we raise it to $10? Should we raise it to $13? Does anyone ever listen really carefully to that discussion? When are they talking about raising the minimum wage? It's not now. It's not next year. We're talking 3 and 4 and 5 years from now, when $13 an hour will still be what? Insufficient to raise a family. So I think then the onus is on us to begin to train and prepare those that we touch for occupations that put them into a different economic bracket. All right, let's talk about young adults. Listen, those could be your Harper students. That could easily have been a picture taken on your campus. Number of U.S. young adults, 15 to 24, neither working nor in school. Come on, give me something. I see you guys over there laughing. Are you shrugging your shoulders because you're thinking, oh, whatever number I'm going to say is going to be too low? 1 million? 2 million? All right. Here's a sobering one for us, just locally. So the unemployment rate for young adults is ages 16 to 24 is nearly double the national average now. That actually doesn't seem so bad. Chicagoland area, 200,000 young adults, ages 18 to 24, neither engaged in employment nor education. And we wonder what's happening with respect to crime. We wonder what's happening in our society. Part of this, and let me just point out, that number, those kids actually have graduated from school. We're not talking about dropouts. When we add in the dropouts, we're going to go through the roof. These are actually the kids who've graduated from school. Chicago Public School System, 40% of their graduates every year are neither connected to employment nor education. 40%. Those are the kids who have graduated. I'm not even talking about the dropouts. It's shameful. And so we wonder, we talked about vocational ed earlier. I don't know where the gentleman went from the manufacturing company. I feel so passionately about the issue of vocational education, and it's easy for me to talk about this. I've got my degrees, blah, blah, blah. My kids are in college. I expect the little one to go to college, but I think about this all the time. What if he doesn't want to go to college? He's 10. And he takes coding and programming, and he's part of that whole gamification of the education system and our children. And I think about this. Well, what if he doesn't want to go to college? Okay, but what's he going to do with his life? What's he going to be prepared to do? Because he can't do nothing, because that's what those kids are doing. They're doing nothing. And not necessarily because they want to do nothing, because they don't necessarily know how to access opportunity, they don't have resources, they've not seen other people do something else. There are a variety of reasons. We often make the assumption that there's some other reason for them to not be participating in the labor force, and the reality there are a lot of barriers that keep them out. But when I think about vocational education, the reality is that we've eliminated vocational education from schools because we've decided that there is no value there. And we have to change that. There has to be value and dignity associated with work of all types. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be an engineer. But what you do have to do is have a place that you get up and go to every day that fills you with a sense of personal pride and respect and dignity, and that allows you to support your family as well. What's that number? It's huge, right? No, that's just yours and mine, Michelle. That is the earnings loss over the next 10 years from that group of young adults who are not engaged in the labor market. These are sobering numbers. I'm actually going to cheer you up in just a few minutes. Depress them first, raise them up later. All right, so 7 years is the amount of time that millennials have been experiencing double-digit unemployment. Double-digit unemployment. Now here's the wacky thing. 2 years, average tenure for a millennial at a job. What's it for the boomers? It's just 5. Everybody thinks it's like forever, right? Yeah, it's just 5. But what do those numbers tell us? We have to prepare the next generation with the foundational skills they need to be able to move into different sectors and different industries. But there's some basic skills that everybody's got to have in order to be able to transfer that and parlay it into a career. So another group of folks that we serve, the long-term unemployed. And let me say something about the labels that I didn't say before. I think it is really, really important that we think critically about the terminology that we use when referencing our students, in our case, our job seekers, our clients. And the reason I say that is because it affects our mindset and how we approach and deal with them. So when we talk about the changing demographics, when you talk about the browning of the community, when you talk about the change with respect to age in the workplace, how we speak about those people affects how we treat them, how we interact with them, whether we employ them or not. So it's very, very important that we think about our language. When I'm speaking to the frontline staff within the public workforce system, I always say to them, if you're using negative language about your clients, how can you be an advocate for them? How can you then talk to an employer and say, hey, I want you to hire so-and-so. You know, he's long-term unemployed and he's a veteran and an ex-offender. He's got so many barriers, but I really want you to hire him. Like that just can't be the conversation. It's a non-starter. It's the same thing about vocational ed. Like, we can't just denigrate different types and different paths because we take ourselves and those that we serve out of the game. So long-term unemployed, we define what that is. I will never tell an employer that somebody's long-term unemployed, right? Because it's not an asset-based conversation. You're starting with all the deficits. So the asset-based conversation is a discussion about the skills that someone's bringing to the table and why that employer should be excited about them. But it's important for us to know about the populations and to be able to do these categories, because it will dictate how we serve them. Because I'm going to serve a long-term unemployed job seeker differently than a young adult. And why is that? So look at this number. So 34% of those categorized as long-term unemployed were employed 15 months later. What about the other 66%? So what happens during those 15 months? Oh, wow, he just went right there. He says they go homeless. Sometimes their kids have to drop out of school if they're in school. What else? What'd you say? Jail, wow. What else? I just took you all to a really dark spot. Yes. They give up. To me, that is the absolute worst thing. I call it losing your mojo. Because now, how much of our self-worth is tied to work? How many of you are workaholics? Admit it. Raise your hands high. Come on. You love your work, right? You derive great satisfaction from your work, and part of your identity is tied up in your work. I used to work with a person who would put on, you know, the signature line of the emails, the business cards, everything. Not kidding. BA, MBA, CPA. It's like, really? You're acting like an A because you got to have all your degrees everywhere. No one needs to know all of that. But it was deeply rooted for her that she needed to be able to show that she had these degrees and that she was somebody in something. So spend 15 months, or I'm sorry, 66% of them are spending more than that. Spend 15 months or more unemployed, and what happens to that deeply rooted sense of self? It begins to erode. And so when that person sets foot in your classroom, when that person comes to your program, you're going to serve them very differently because you've got a fundamental space that you've got to fill for them first before they can even get to a point where they even think an employer's going to give them a second look. You actually have to teach them how to interview all over again. How do you explain the gap on your resume? And how do you do that in a way that projects confidence and will actually make an employer want to take a chance on you? Any thoughts? Wow. I heard your guess. Did you say 53? Yeah, 11%. 11% in any given month. These numbers are staggering. They're sobering. But this is why your part-time student population is increasing because they may have the interest, but they don't have the money. Or they've got so many other pressing commitments and needs that have to be addressed, they can't give that kind of time. So what do employers want? This is the part that I find most interesting. So we have these discussions about what we need to do from an education standpoint. On the one level, I believe in education for education's sake. Honestly, I really wish I could go back to college again. Not just because it was fun, but I would take a whole bunch of classes that I didn't bother to take before just for the sake of learning some really cool, interesting stuff, right? Like, you know, Mark Twain said youth is wasted on the young. He was absolutely right, particularly when it comes to going to college, because people are off doing stupid stuff when they could be really having a great time in the classroom just being intellectually stimulated, right? Okay, I'm a nerd. But when I think about the discussions that we have about training for employer demand and employer need, we do that from a space of what our perception is of what employers need and what they want. And I'll tell you, the data kind of turns things on its ear. This is the percent of employers that report that college graduates are not adequately prepared for work. So here's the disconnect. We make cars. Our students, follow the analogy, work with me. All right, so we make cars. And we make cars that we think are roadworthy. They have wheels, they have an engine, they have sleek features like Bluetooth, so you can hands-free dial and not get pulled over by the police. Got all these great fancy things, and we think, oh, it goes 100 miles an hour. Like, this is a great car. Everybody's gonna want it. We think we're producing Teslas. That tells us that the employer thinks we're producing Pintos. So what do you think are the most in-demand competencies? Critical thinking. Computer literacy. Intercultural communication. What'd you say? All right, collaboration, ability to work in the team. You ready? Judgment and decision making. Communication. The ability to analyze. And the ability to perform administrative duties. So manage paperwork, manage tasks. Did anybody see anything about technical skills up there? And then this one, I'll walk you through it if you can't see it very well. Now, let me just say on that previous slide, I would think that an exception would be in the context of, manufacturing, engineering, some of these very, very highly technical occupations. But there's even some exceptions there, because oftentimes when I meet with employers, they say, make sure they know to come to work on time, dress properly, treat people with respect, and put in an honest day's work. I'll teach them the rest. I hear it every single week. They say the same thing. On the other hand, then they say, I want somebody they want the purple squirrel with the pink polka dots. And after you talk to employers a little bit, I often say, oh, I get it, you really just want a cat. You really just want a cat. You think you want a purple squirrel. A purple squirrel is really not going to do all the things you want. And so it's really having this conversation to ferret out, oh, that translates into this attribute. Oh, you want this? That really means this. And so it winds up being a cat that they wanted after all. They just thought a purple squirrel was going to work better. So this represents the gap between the importance of skills and the worker's current skill level, as perceived by the employers. You follow me? So when you look over here, I guess there's no laser thingy. So the top red is a severe deficit, the middle is moderate, small, and then none. So when you look at where the gap is, where the importance is placed, can you all read all of that? So it's personal accountability for work, self-motivation, strong work ethic, punctuality, showing up to work on time management skills, professionalism, and adaptability. Where's the technical skill in that? So what, from how many people teach math? Anybody math in here? Okay, so in math, you've got a problem, so you're going to solve for x, right? How do you solve for that in the context of a community college? Yes?
I was on a group that was looking about readiness for college.
Yes?
They did the exact same.
Right. So what she said was she was in a group that was looking at readiness for college, and that these are the exact same issues. So I submit to you that this is less about technical skills than it is about life skills. Now, in workforce world, they call it soft skills. I detest that term, because soft in our society implies weak, malleable, not really important, especially when juxtaposed with hard skills. These are the skills that employers demand. The lack of these skills will get you fired, no matter how technically astute you are. So, again, how do we solve for that? How do we train for that? From my perspective, and this is, a Southern black thing, that's just lacking home skills, right? Like, that's what we were, those are life skills. Those are life skills. And I say this all the time. All of this does not begin in K through 12. This is pre-K. Dr. Applegate said, from the womb, right? From the moment they hit Earth. These are basic skills that folks are coming to us lacking because we as a society have changed. How many of you have gone out to dinner with a group of friends and you look up and everybody's on their phone? Did you say guilty? It's a problem because we're not making eye contact. We're not deeply engaged and connected to one another. And that lack of connectivity plays out not only at home. So how many of you have teenagers and you sit down to eat and they're not, some of them might not even be at the dinner table, but if they are there, they're not present. So think about how that plays out in the workplace. How many of you are teaching and they're not present in your classrooms? Raise your hands high, just admit it. I see smiles. Yeah, it's exactly that. I actually forbid cell phones in my meetings with my staff. I'm not trying to look at the top of your head. I'm actually having a conversation, so I need you here, right? And so all of these are issues that we have to seek to address, because if we're going to be more highly connected to employers, and I have to tell you that Dr. Anderson was so right. I tell Dr. Ender this all the time. People are so jealous of Harper College. I hear it everywhere I go. They are so jealous of you all. You've got great employer relationships. You've got wonderful hands-on technical skills programs. And folks in this area wish they were you. And I don't say that lightly. I'm connected to every single community college in Cook County, and they all talk about how they want to be Harper. So you're doing something right. So what's sort of that next level? What's that next step? It's going to be this, because that's the piece that is going to continue to engage those employers. So you want there to be hundreds and hundreds of Lukes. Not just one or two standouts. You want that to be the norm in terms of who you're turning out and who you're connecting to your employers. The one thing I was going to say, let me go back one second. The other thing I was going to say about this, and I was talking about home training, and that pre-K example. When you're on the playground, you got 3 or 4-year-olds playing. Inevitably, somebody's crying, right? Somebody's upset about something. Tommy took so-and-so's toy. And so Tommy learns that if he takes Johnny's toy, a couple things are going to happen. Johnny's going to cry. Johnny's going to go tell the teacher. Johnny's going to whack him in the head. Right? Our young adults are not making those causal connections. And as a result, they're showing up lacking these things. And as a result, they're getting fired. And he just didn't like me. That's why he fired me. He just didn't like me. No, he didn't like your attitude. Now, here's the other thing. I find this to be a complete and total conundrum. So again, what employers say versus what we think they want. So when you look at these are the attributes that are considered most by employers when they're making a hiring decision with respect to a college graduate. So, and here's the relative importance. So if you look at those top 5, internships, employment during college, college major, volunteer experience, extracurricular activities, which one is related to technical skills? So your top 5, only one has anything to do with technical relevance. But here's the problem with that for me. So everything is focused on experience. So internships give you job experience or some sort of hands-on practical experience. Employment during college gives you some practical experience in the world. Volunteer experience, again, some sort of practical hands-on experience. And extracurricular activities, perhaps. But you will learn, who mentioned collaboration? Right, so extracurricular activities, you might, likely they're team sports, so you might be learning something about team building, about leadership, about collaboration. But for me, this is a chicken and the egg argument because, now think about our long-term unemployed population and think about our youth. So on the young adult side, we're saying we want you to have experience when you're coming in the door. But if they're not having opportunities to engage and get practical experience, then they can't get experience. I mean, you can't say on the one hand, I want you to have experience, but I'm not willing to give you any. On the other hand, the long-term unemployed, why are they unemployed for so long? Because they can't find work. Because employers are looking at them and thinking there's something wrong with them because they're what? Long-term unemployed. But what do they have that young adults don't have? Experience. So it doesn't make any sense. Like, it really makes no sense whatsoever. There's something wrong with the argument. I can't find experienced workers, but you have applicant tracking systems and other mechanisms that are devised to screen out those folks that have a gap in their employment. Those are your experienced workers. So here's the other thing about experience and training. There has been a 21% decrease in employer-sponsored job training. Employers are focused on their bottom lines. So there's been a disinvestment in job training. Ironically, one great way to get job training is through the federal workforce programs, which what? Subsidize job training. And then here's another sobering statistic, 53% of our college grads are unemployed or underemployed. When we look at the growth and the new jobs that are coming online, where are they? Disproportionately low-wage jobs for high school, diploma holders. So our solution has been to focus specifically on our target industries. These are the 7 high-growth, high-demand industries within Cook County. Business and professional services, information technology, healthcare. We lump together hospitality, culinary, and retail just for discussion purposes because it actually looks nicer with 6 and 7. And then you see under their occupations, because those are the occupations that we're focusing on, or the number within that target group. So how do we get our students, our job seekers, focused on these industries and understanding what's actually available for them and what the career pathways look like? That's part of our responsibility, I think, in the coaching, the advising, the counseling that we're doing. And we have to use labor market information tools. So one, demonstrating those career pathways, showing the different types of roles, the salaries that are available at the various levels, and the skills that folks need. We also created target occupational profiles that many people use to help explain the skills and the abilities that are required, as well as where you can get the training. And then there's a quarterly report that shows where the jobs are within Cook County. So every single quarter we do a retrospective look at who was hiring, what were they hiring for, what were the skills, what were the credentials that they were seeking. So what is it going to take for us to prepare that future workforce? Career coaching. I really advocate for a paradigm shift. When we talk about serving the changing demographic in the community, the term counseling has all sorts of triggers for people. People think therapy. I don't need therapy, right? Career coaching is a completely different paradigm, and it actually requires a different skill set. So we need to not look at folks as cases to be managed, but as individuals with assets and strengths that we need to assess and ascertain, and then showcase and highlight and shore up. Also, we want them to explore the career pathways. And we want to look at eligibility for multiple programs, because there's multiple funding sources to get people connected to employment. And then finally, developing employment plans, individualized employment plans. I often say that people can't be what they can't see. And so it's our responsibility to help show them what they can be and show them the pathway to get there. But also remember that there's flexibility. We don't have to be rigid. You don't have to do exactly this in order to get here. Heck, I majored in Spanish language and literature with a minor in Portuguese and Italian. Who knew I'd be running a workforce system? Believe me, my family did not. What is she majoring in up there? Engaging employers is critical, more critical now than ever before. Given the sobering statistics that I started you off with, we really have to, again, think about what is our objective. So on the one hand, there's education for education's sake, but on the other hand, there is making sure that we are producing a product that employers want to buy. And I hate to put it that way, but it really, it's that simple. One of my colleagues who runs the Miami-Dade workforce system, I guess got a few more slides and then I'm done, puts it this way. He said, you know, our job seekers really aren't our clients. Our clients are the businesses. And this was his analogy. He said, you know, when you go buy a car, you can go to any dealership and they've got these certified pre-owned cars. He's like, what are they? They're used cars, right? But they have this seal of approval. He's like, so CarMax has become this national corporation it's a used car dealership. That's really all it is. But they put their cars through all of these different rigorous tests, and you get this seal of approval. He said, you know what? Our job seekers are no different. They're going through our systems. They're connected to our trainers. They're connected to our colleges. They have a seal of approval when we send them out. They're all used. They've worked somewhere else. They've had some struggles. They've had some hard experiences, but we've given them this seal of approval, and we've sent them off the lot to a new purchaser, right? Weird, but I actually like that analogy. This one's difficult to see. So this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's the most new jobs, the 20 occupations with the highest projected numbers. So sadly, the top one is personal care aides. You know why that is? Because our population is aging, right? But what's the salary? Now, to me, it's almost analogous to teachers. Teachers get paid bunkus for what we do. Like, as a teacher, every child has to pass through your hands. And so these personal care aides are taking care of our loved ones who are ill. $19,000 a year is the median pay. Below that is registered nurses, $65,000. Was that 60? Yeah, $65,000. And on it goes. So personal care aides make nothing, doesn't require a ton of training, doesn't require college education, and they make next to nothing, but it's the highest growing occupation. 65% of jobs require some sort of post-secondary education or training beyond high school by 2020. That's where you come in. And the question becomes, what do you have to do differently to reach the population that needs to be reached and get them prepared and connected? And Dr. Sam mentioned this earlier. 65% of today's grade school children will work in jobs that haven't even been invented yet. We can't necessarily solve for that, but we can give them all of those skills that we know employers need and want so that they will be prepared. They'll be prepared technically, more likely than not, but will they be prepared from a social, emotional standpoint? Who knows? And here's the best thing for our community colleges: a number of job openings in our economy through 2020. So what's your task? Your task is to prepare young men and women, old men and women who've been disconnected from the workforce, to educate them, to support them, and to serve them and help them prepare to excel in whatever occupation they choose. Thank you.